Hello out there, my amazing third grade scholars. We're back and I'm Miss Cummings, and this week we'll be covering week 5, day 1. Let's get into it. Today, you will be able to compare and contrast the story elements within a series. You'll also be able to write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to write and publish our own Magic Tree House story. That's right, we're going to add to this amazing series. Remember, a series is a set of fiction books with a connected storyline and characters. So we know that there are certain things that ring true to the Magic Tree House series, as far as the characters and the setting, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Remember, a few weeks ago, we did have the opportunity to compare and contrast the characters as well as the setting of the Magic Tree House story. We're going to review that just a little bit so that we can understand what things need to stay the same as we begin to develop our Magic Tree House story. So let's start with our characters. Remember, we were reading both the Dinosaurs Before Dark and the Night at Dawn series. We were reading both of them and we were comparing our main characters, which is Annie and Jack, from both of those stories. In the story, Dinosaurs Before Dark, we saw that Annie was adventurous, she was fearless, she took some dangerous risks, sometimes without thinking. She was the younger sister and she liked to play pretend. We also noticed that those exact same characteristics also showed up in the story Night at Dawn. We noticed that our friend Jack was responsible. He tends to worry quite a bit. He's brave when absolutely necessary. He's protective of his sister. We notice he's older, a lot more serious than Annie, and he also loves to take notes throughout the series. We noticed that in Dinosaurs Before Dark, and again, we also noticed those exact same characteristics at Night at Dawn. So as we begin to develop our story and as we begin to develop our characters, we want to make sure that those key traits stay the same. So for Annie, we want to keep her adventurous, fearless. We want to make her take some risk without thinking. She's the younger sister. We want to keep her in that position. And we also want her to still enjoy playing pretend. With Jack, we want him to remain responsible. He can tend to worry quite a bit. We want him to be brave when needed, protective of his sister, older, serious, and we also want to see him taking some notes in our personal story. But don't worry, you can get a little creative and develop our characters, and we can start to see maybe our characters grow a little bit. Also, in your series, if you want to experiment with characterization a little bit more, you can also add other characters to your story and develop their character as well. So, what characteristics will you add or adjust? Will Annie have a moment where she is actually scared of something? Will Jack have more brave moments in your story? Will there be other characters? I want you to take a second and jot down your thoughts and creative ideas as far as how you can continue to develop these characters. All right. The next thing we kind of talked about a few weeks ago was setting, and that there's different types of setting. So we have time. You can do time as far as seasons, as far as clock time, like what time is it? You can do it as far as a time period in history. You can also look at winter, summer, spring, fall, and specific dates in your story. Setting is also about location. Exactly where in the state, the country, the continent, a specific location, where is this story taking place? And remember that we also have social cultural settings. That means that there's a set of beliefs or values that are coming into play that may determine how the story goes. So for instance, if a story takes place during the civil rights period, there are going to be certain rights and laws that need to be considered when you're writing your story. Also, you'll want to think of clothing and hairstyles for that time period. If you're going to do something in medieval times, you'll want to consider some of the values, the beliefs, the traditions, maybe something with women's rights, things that came into play socially, the values and beliefs that are going to come into play in your story. So we noticed in our series, The Magic Tree House, with the Dinosaurs Before Dark, we noticed that the story begins in the present. Majority of the story takes place millions of years ago in the Cretaceous time period. We notice also the place is Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. Our story always starts there. We notice our characters always go into the woods and they always encounter the treehouse. Now, in Dinosaurs Before Dark, they travel back to almost like a tropical forest. Social cultural wise, we notice that there aren't a lot of people. In fact, there's no people except for Jack and Annie, who really don't even belong in the time period, right? And so the social cultural setting is about animal survival, survival of the fittest. As we move into Night at Dawn, the story also begins in the present, and then our characters teleport back to the past, which happens to be the Middle Ages. We also notice that, again, our place where we start is Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. We kind of got a view of Jack's bedroom and Annie and Jack's house, but we always ended up back in the woods near the treehouse. And eventually in our story, we do end up in a castle and a courtyard. Social cultural, we notice that the people traveled by horse, the knights wore heavy armor, people lived behind castle walls, they had feast and music that played to announce certain foods at the feast, and they ate peacocks. So we notice that there are some things that are a little bit different for that time period than it is today. And so when we're writing our story, we want to make sure that we stay true to the time. Our characters need to begin in the present, and our characters need to use that treehouse to teleport back in time. As far as place, both of the books begin in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. That's where our characters live. So we want to stay true to that when we're writing our story. So finally, we also have our social cultural setting. We notice in Dinosaurs Before Dark, there were no human characters, therefore there were no beliefs or values or traditions. Also, we notice that in the Night of Dawn, there are people and traditions. One tradition is that they had feasts where music was played to announce certain foods at the feast. And they also ate peacocks. So we notice that. As you develop your story, we know that the time is going to be similar, the place is going to be similar, but the thing that's going to change based on the time period you select is the social cultural setting. What values, beliefs, and norms are your characters going to encounter when they travel back to a certain time period? All right, so in just a moment, I'm going to give you some think time. As you're thinking, I want you to think about what time period will Jack and Annie teleport to in your story. Next, I want you to think about where will Jack and Annie teleport to in your story. Finally, what will be unique about the characters, technology, and traditions, etc. in your story? Take a second and jot down some ideas. Ooh, I bet they were great ideas. All right, let's keep moving. If we know anything about a story, it's like a roller coaster. Woo! Right? You've got some low parts, you've got some super exciting parts, and then you've got some parts that kind of calm down, and then we come to a solution, or what we like to call a resolution. So the exposition is the part of the story where we are introduced to the setting and the characters. So we're going to look at Night at Dawn, and we're also going to look at Dinosaurs Before Dark and look at how the author chose to introduce those characters in the exposition. All right, in the exposition, we're usually introduced to our characters. In this case, it's Annie and Jack. And we're also introduced to the storyline, or how the plot is going to go. Let's look at it. For instance, in Dinosaurs Before Dark, they discover the treehouse. They select a book that reflects the time period in which they want to travel. In Night at Dawn, they go to a treehouse because they already know where it is, and they select a book that reflects the time period that they want to travel. See how that's the same? And because it's the same, it really reflects that our series is connected. Next, we get to a rising action. Usually in the rising action, this is where our problem is presented. In Dinosaurs Before Dark, Annie and Jack encounter various dinosaurs. Now that could be a problem. In Night at Dawn, Annie and Jack are being chased throughout the castle and the courtyard by various knights and servants. The climax is the most exciting part of the story. I mean, if you were watching an action movie, it's where the music gets really intense. Okay, you get the point. So in our climax in Dinosaurs Before Dark, Jack and Annie encounter the T-Rex. And Jack had to face danger to grab his backpack. You remember that part? Now in Night at Dawn, Jack falls out of the window into the moat that may actually have crocodiles. So that is the climax. That's where things get really exciting. As we get into the falling action, our characters are beginning to calm down. Some resolutions are coming into play. Some solutions to a problem is coming into play. In Dinosaurs Before Dark, Jack makes it back to the treehouse safely. In Night at Dawn, the knight shows up and he takes Jack and Annie back to the treehouse. And finally, our resolution. Everything usually gets tied together in a nice, neat bow, but sometimes it doesn't in some stories. But in the Magic Treehouse series, things tend to get tied up nice and neat. Because in Dinosaurs Before Dark, Jack and Annie, they look at the book that has Frog Creek, Pennsylvania in it, and they actually are able to return home. In Night at Dawn, Jack and Annie look at the book and return home. Jack looks at the medallion and the bookmark that he's collected from each of the stories and tries to figure out who is the owner of the treehouse. So the question becomes, what should we keep the same about our plot? We definitely want to continue to make sure that our characters are using the books in the treehouse to travel to different time periods. We want the element of danger and adventure. Who or what will be chasing our characters? Dun 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 dun. And we want our treehouse to be our time machine. We want to return to the treehouse and use the book with Frog Creek, Pennsylvania to return home. And in our story, we want to make sure that we're finding clues that may tell us who the owner of the treehouse is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a moment and pause and let our brains get some rest. You know what I love to do, and hopefully you love it too. Go ahead and stand up out of your seats and let's get our groove on. DJ, drop the beat. All right, if you're anything like me, you've got all the wiggles and jiggles out, it is time for Read Aloud. We will be reading the #2 book in the series, The Night at Dawn of the Magic Treehouse series, and we're gonna be in chapter 7, pages 42 through 49. Let's go. Annie and Jack raced back up the winding stairs and down the long hallway. They hadn't gone far when they heard shouting behind them. Dogs barked in the distance. "They're coming!" Annie cried. "In here," said Jack. He shoved open a door off the hallway and pulled Annie into a dark room. Jack pushed the door shut. Then Annie shined her flashlight around the room. There were rows of sacks and wooden barrels. "I'd better look in the book," said Jack, pulling out the book and flipping through the pages. "Shh," said Annie. "Someone's coming." Jack and Annie jumped behind the door as it creaked open. Jack held his breath. A light from a torch danced wildly over the sacks and barrels. The light disappeared. The door slammed shut. "Oh man," whispered Jack. "We have to hurry. They might come back." His hands were trembling as he turned the pages of the castle book. "Here's a map of the castle," he said. "Look, this must be the room we're in. It's a storm room." Jack studied the room in the book. "These are sacks of flowers and barrels of wine." "Who cares? We have to go," said Annie, "before they come back." "No, look," said Jack. He pointed at the map. "There's a trap door." He read aloud. "In this castle, a trap door led from the storm room through a secret passage to a precipice over the moat." "What's a precipice?" said Annie. "I don't know. We'll find out," said Jack. But first, we have to find the trap door. Jack looked at the picture carefully. Then he shined the flashlight around the room. The floor of the room was made of stone. The trap door in the picture was 5 stones from the door to the hallway. Jack shined the light on the floor and counted the stones out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He stamped on the 5th stone. It was loose. Jack put the flashlight on the floor. He worked his fingers under the thin slab of stone and tried to lift it. "Help!" Jack said. "It's heavy." Annie helped Jack lift the stone square out of its place. Underneath was a small wooden door. Jack and Annie tugged on the rope handle of the door. The door fell open with a thunk. Jack picked up the flashlight and shined it down the hole. "There's a little ladder," he said. "Let's go." He clipped the flashlight onto his belt and felt his way down the small ladder. Annie followed. When they reached the bottom of the ladder, Jack shined the light around them. There was a tunnel. Jack crouched down and began moving through the damp, creepy tunnel. The flashlight dimly flickered across the stone walls. He shook the light. "Were the batteries going dead?" "I think our light's dying," said Annie. "Hurry," she called from behind him. Jack went faster. His back hurt from crouching. The light got dimmer and dimmer. Jack was desperate to get out of the castle before the batteries died completely. Soon he reached another small wooden door. It was the door at the end of the tunnel. Jack unlatched the door and pushed it open. He poked his head outside. He couldn't see anything in the misty darkness. The air felt cool and fresh. He took a deep breath. "Where are we?" whispered Annie behind him. "What do you see?" "Nothing, but I think we've come to the outside of the castle," said Jack. "I'll find out." Jack put the flashlight in his pack. He put the pack on his back. He stuck his hand out of the door. He couldn't feel the ground. "I'm going to have to go feet first," he said. Jack turned around in the small tunnel. He lay down on his stomach. He stuck one leg out the door, then the other. Jack inched down, bit by bit, until he was hanging out the door, clinging to the ledge. "This must be the precipice," he called to Annie. I can't touch the ground. Pull me up." Annie reached for Jack's hands. I can't hold you," she said. Jack felt his fingers slipping. Then down he fell through the darkness. Splash. And that ends chapter 7. Now remember, that moat might just have crocodiles in it. Is Jack going to survive? I also want you to think about the fact that this was our climax. This is where the action was really moving. They were moving throughout that castle, running from people. They were hiding in tunnels and climbing through tunnels. And Jack actually fell out of a window into a moat that may be crocodile-filled. What is your climax going to look like when you write your story? Take a second, think, and jot down some of those ideas. All right, excellent work. You know what time it is. It's my favorite time. It's your favorite time. That's right, it's our favorite time. It is 30-minute reading time. This is the time where you get to relax with your favorite book and read for 30 minutes. But before you begin, let's set a focus. If you have a series book that you absolutely love and would like to read, grab it now and get into it. Remember to find a quiet place where you can really focus and concentrate. Also, select a book that you can read without the help of an adult. And put away any electronics that you are not using to track your reading time. That's right, you can use your cell phone to set your timer, but we should not be scrolling social media. You're right, exactly. All right, so go ahead and grab your series book, enjoy and relax for 30 minutes, and meet me right back here for some writing. I hope you enjoyed that 30-minute reading time. Now it is time to jump into some writing. And of course, we're going to be writing our own Magic Treehouse story that stays true to the series within itself. All right. So today, as we write, we're going to be doing some research and we're going to select a time period. To give you a little bit of help, I've chosen 3 different events in history or time periods that you could select from. So the first one is the Wild West. Yeehaw! The next one is Pompeii, which is an event that took place in history. And the last one is ancient Egypt, which is also a time period. So you could pick one of these time periods or events to base your story off of. If you have your own time period or your own event in history that you would like to base your story off of, that's okay too. So today, you are going to be doing a little bit of research during your writing time. The first thing we want you to do is to select a time period that your characters will travel to. This will help you to establish your setting. So, what year will your characters travel to in your story? What is the social cultural setting? What are the people in this time period wearing? What are the important laws and rules that we need to know? And what are their beliefs? Also, what types of technology are they using in this time period? So for example, our social cultural setting in medieval times were that the men are in charge while the women are in supportive roles. The knights were roaming throughout the castle. There's little to no technology, and they also rode horses rather than the cars that we use for transportation for today. Next, you are going to identify the problem. What problem will your characters face? What's the main problem and what are little mini problems that they run into? So for example, a major problem that Annie and Jack travel back in time and they want to explore the time period, but they also want to get home safely. A mini problem is that they are being chased around the castle by knights and servants. Create a solution to your problem. How will your problem be solved by the end of your story? So, a major solution to the major problem is that Annie and Jack return to the treehouse and they also get an opportunity to return to Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. Take some time and jot down your concepts. Again, what is your setting going to be? Particularly your social cultural setting and your time period or event in history. Identify your major and minor problems that your characters will encounter throughout the story. And finally, identify the solutions to those major and minor problems. Great work today, kiddos, and I'll see you back here for another lesson soon.